I don't know what I did with the clicker, so we're just on the keyboard here. Okay, so I was pretty research active while we were away. Break is a really good time for me to take big swings at a lot of the stuff. So you'll see a lot of stuff kind of in motion here. I've got maybe 3 lab reports that I filed over the break. So those were recorded, and you're welcome to catch up on some of those if you're interested. But I'll try to backfill some of what I'm talking about here for what's been going on. Yusheng Wu has a link out. He's a part of the GeoJupyter project. And so for the people in the programming class, we'll take a look at that. Seems brand new. I haven't checked it out yet, other than to know that it's around. So talked about Jupyter Notebooks today. It's clearly related to that project, but you know, hopefully some mapping would be great. Some easy ways to get maps and open source would be good. There are a number of us working on indoor mapping projects of some kind. And so I made a lot of headway over break, looking at both the LiDAR scanners that we already owned and then new ones. A couple of really exciting developments are, so this is one that is pretty new. So it's on a Kickstarter. I don't know, I saw a link somewhere for how much I think they were trying to price this at, but it was in the neighborhood of like 1,200, 1,400, which is pretty cheap. It uses the exact same LiDAR scanner. It's got a hemisphere, is a Livox mid 360 sensor, which we already do own in the lab. So we'll keep an eye on this one. A couple of other really exciting developments there. So I spent a lot of time on the Ouster sensor, which is like a 128 channel LiDAR sensor, really great. Hopefully something good will come of that. I found some instructions for creating a handheld scanner. And given the fact that we already own all the components that we need for this, all I needed to get was a Raspberry Pi. So I ordered one of those. So we may try to build one of these this semester. We'll see how that goes. And then I spent a lot of time testing a really nice unit that I very much hope to buy. I also spent time trying to get remote ID enabled on my small drone that I built. So there's a home-built drone by me, designed and built, called BusyBee, but I haven't played with it since I came here. Remote ID rules just came into full effect in March of 2024, and I haven't flown it since then. So I knew I needed to update it. I actually had the thing to do it. It turned out to be this giant rabbit hole. So I spent about a week on this. In the best case scenario, you can, for $100, $200, buy a little unit that you can just like Velcro on your drone. I was trying to find one that sort of like integrated like more completely with it. So it wasn't just the thing that you stick on your drone. And that's where I ran into trouble. It turns out that there are 2 separate rules. There's what's called broadcast remote ID, which is these like little $200 modules that you just stick on there. And then there's, I forget what they call it, standard remote ID, something like that, where that's the manufacturer side where they like fully integrate it. But to do that, you have to fill out a certificate, a declaration of compliance, a DOC with the FAA, and they have to approve it. I found this guy who had actually done it. So it's not set up for people like me to just build their own drones. It's set up for like a real manufacturer. So you have to get like serial numbers and you have to like go through the whole thing. But he had done it and they posted something in one of the forums. It was like, I succeeded. So I emailed him and asked him if he would share with me his packet, which he did. And so I'm going to try to do this in maybe the same way that you've been trying to get your flights approved. We'll see, you know, maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but having a model should help. So he was very helpful. The other LiDAR scanner that I've been testing is the XGrid K1. This is amazing. This is really what I have been looking for a long time. That it's got the same Livox mid 360 LiDAR sensor as the hemispherical dome at the top. And it's got cameras on either side of it. So it can produce a full color point cloud without anything else. So there's a little like hatch in the back where like an SD card can go, and there's a USB port. Take it out of the case, turn it on, walk around with it, turn it off, pull the SD card. You've got a file that has all this stuff. It's amazing. This particular unit costs something like there's a RTK GPS that goes on it. So this one doesn't have it, but the other one did, and it goes on top. So with that, it's like $15,000. But it really is like plug and play, right? You open the case and you just start doing it. Whereas I'm a little afraid that everything else is going to be kind of fiddly. It's going to work. It's not going to work. There's like software that will post-process this. There's software to turn this into. So in advanced remote sensing, I talked just a little bit about NRFs, neural radiance fields. Do you guys remember that? Mm-hmm. So it's a different way of sort of like recreating an environment. It doesn't use a point cloud. It's not a mesh. It's this sort of weird thing. I actually dug deep into like, what is a Gaussian splat, which apparently is a kind of radiance field, as opposed to something else entirely. I thought it was maybe a kind of a technique that kind of married with the neural radiance fields, but it's a little different than that. Interestingly, the default format for that is a PLY, which is basically just a point cloud with some extra attribute information in there, which is fascinating. These things are incredibly small. Yeah, lots of neat stuff on that, and a lot of that stuff is documented, including some scans that I did. So this is with the Lixilkitty K1. I brought it in here and just kind of first did the room. You know, for a 1 minute scan, I think this turned out great. And this is not by any means the best that it can do, right? So I was really happy with how this turned out. Way faster than like indoor photogrammetry and a bunch of other stuff. Just wave it around, off to the races. This is an overhead view. I was interested to see to what degree, you know, my goal for a lot of this indoor mapping stuff, at least as a first cut, is I want something that looks like an aerial photo from above, right? An orthographic map of this room from above, overhead at all places, right? That's what I'm after. So the question here is like, can you use the point cloud or mesh to generate one of those? The answer is kind of not really. Like it's still kind of blotchy. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. It's good, right? Like you can make stuff out. It's not quite what I want, but it's a step in the right direction. This was a test that I did. Some of these are animated and some aren't. So let me guess this one is. All right, so this is, I opened up the door down here and wanted to try a test just kind of moving it around. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to handle like me opening doors and then going through them, whether that was going to throw it off. So that's in the next test. But there we are at the lab. Hallway looks good. I didn't go into any of the classrooms, right? It's just whatever open portals I could go through. Turned out great, you know, like this is a really good model of that. And then building on, I guess that's the same one. And then the next one was starting in here, but then opening the door for the stairwell, going up the stairwell, opening that door, and then going upstairs. So can we create a 2-floor model and can we open doors? And this turned out great as well, right? So you're seeing the room encapsulated, right? So in the other ones, I've sort of like sectioned off the top so you could like look into the room, but it's scanning the ceiling as much as anything else. So that's why it looks enclosed. When you get to a window, you can see out the window. So it's sort of, you know, there's a bit of junk on the outside. That's not so bad. But in terms of a 3D model, this is really good, right? And then I guess that's the same. I don't know why I have duplicates. This is the first floor. This is just a static image. Tons of really good stuff here. You'll notice a little bit of a bend in here, right? So this is a little off. And that's the kind of thing that probably would be fixed on post-processing. So I didn't post-process any of these. It was like straight off the instrument, which is amazing. So you can post-process this, and I'm pretty confident that that would be fixed. Yeah, that looks good. And then this one was, I started at the front door of the building. It was snowing that day, so I wanted to do like a whole lap around, but there was too much snow. So I just kind of like hid on the main entryway and then walked inside and then walked out this door and walked back in and then walked out this door, opening doors as I went, right? And just kind of like, so this was a pretty good like indoor outdoor test. And then if you start outdoor, then you can use the RTK GPS. Everything should be precisely located and should merge together with anything else that you want. So I was really happy with all this. This is a 5 mm. So this was a sample data set. There's an upgraded version of this kit called the L2 Pro where the sensor actually spins, which gives you better. This one scans kind of like this. And so you get it's kind of stripy and it sort of fills in as you go. It doesn't get all of the nooks and crannies, and in particular, the horizontal surfaces aren't all that well done because the scanner is oriented kind of in this plane, and you can tilt the scanner and you can make it kind of scan in like a eccentric orbit, but it's still not as good as if it's spinning because then you get this axis and you get this axis and then you get everything. So I was interested in whether like that would improve the floor models. Again, the goal is, can I make something that looks like a photorealistic version of the floor? And the answer is kind of no, right? The L2 Pro costs something like 25,000, so it's a bit of a step up. So the question was it worth it, right? Like, do I want to spend the extra money to get the better sensor that's going to get more spatially complete knowledge? And I think the answer after this is no, right? Like, it still doesn't look like what I need it to look like. So we won't spend the extra 10K. We'll get this one because it's more compact, it's light. Even this, which weighs like 1 kilogram, like gets annoying after a while. Like that's a lot of weight to carry around like this for an hour. So you double the weight basically with a bigger sensor. I think it's not worth the extra hassle. The reason that this is really exciting is I'll leave it here for just a second. The reason this is really exciting is for our indoor mapping project and also for these archaeology projects. So I'm kind of hitting the gas trying to get the K1 purchased before you go to Peru. You can take that down in addition to the drone, and we could do a ground level scan. It's a good backup. You got a second instrument in case it fits, it crashes. But like, you've got another option. And I think like doing this really close to the rock is going to be really useful to image it, right? So you've got this giant, I don't even know how big because they haven't sent me the geocoordinates, but it's this giant rock structure that is a map of its environment. Did you get a link to this? She said,
I emailed her like the other day just asking for some more details, and she said it's a 7,000 cubic meter rock outcropping, and then potentially a couple more smaller, like different sites.
Okay. So I think that's small enough that you can hand scan it, right? That sounds like about building size. Like it can't be immense, right? Because it's got to be, it is a map. So there's a scale at which it doesn't make sense for it to be a map. So yeah, I think this is going to be useful for that. So I'm trying as hard as I can to get this unit before you go.
Okay.
But it's going to be useful for all of these indoor mapping projects that we're after. So, and VR stuff as well. That's kind of what we're going to get into kind of next. This was another reason that I wasn't really sold on the L2 Pro. The other problem is not just that the point spacing isn't quite good enough. It's that the colorization isn't great, right? So it's got these cameras and it's merging the color information with the point cloud information, but you can see that like the angle at which you hit it affects the colorization, right? Like how something looks from this perspective isn't how it looks from another perspective, right? The contrast is different as like I take a photo this way and the window makes it all washed out. But if I take it this way, like it's different. So the colors are going to be different. And I think that is part of a challenge that I frankly hadn't really thought about much. I saw this with the GeoSlam that we did at the CID back at Virginia Tech. So I have seen this before, but I guess I hadn't really thought that much about how that was going to affect the final point cloud. And we never dug into it very far, but same thing happened here. There are ways to adjust that. So Pix4D has ways to try to smooth that out, like to intelligently combine photos to like, okay, that must be this color rather than that color. But it's an extra step that's clearly not happening here. Okay, so I spent a lot of time getting back into NeRFs. The last time I was into NeRFs was maybe June of last year. The NeRFs stand for Neural Radiance Fields. NVIDIA, big graphics card maker and chip maker in general, kind of broke ground on this. And since then, it's become kind of a whole new thing. It's a way to sort of represent the environment taking all of the images, but then figuring out what it would look like from a certain perspective. So you're not actually trying to recreate the environment like you're doing with the point cloud, where you're trying to like, what was here? You're sort of like, what would I see if I were there? You know, so it's sort of like an interpolation question. Like I've got a picture here and a picture there. Like, what would it look like if I was between those two cameras? It's kind of the gist of what NERFs are about. And radiance fields in general. Installing this stuff is terrible. So for the people that were just in my class, you've got to install an environment to get started with all the stuff. I want to run NERF Studio. How do you do that? And my whole last report sort of got into what worked and what didn't. Basically, you try to install NERF Studio, which is a GitHub page on Windows, and you immediately run into problems. Stuff doesn't compile. This version works for this thing. That version doesn't work for this other thing. You can do it on Linux, but there's another way to access Linux called the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is a way to run Linux natively inside a Windows environment, and it's awesome. But it's a little bit different than a real Linux installation. It's almost the same, but it's not quite the same. And so I couldn't get this to work last year when I tried it, and I didn't find anybody that could. But some nice fellow posted this to some forum here a little while ago, back in October, and was like, I got it to work. Here's what I did. And so I tried that, and it worked beautifully. So these are the instructions. I'm going to post this to the NERF Studio page that we have on the wiki. For those in the programming class, how to create, name NERF Studio, Python 3.8, you activate it, you install, actually upgrade pip, you install Torch and some specific versions, blah, 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 blah. Same thing for everything, right? So what we're doing in class is exactly the same as you have to do for all this other stuff. So this is the way to create a little NERF Studio environment that'll work. And I have it running on that machine and at home. I did try to get it to install, I actually couldn't get NERF Studio to install on that machine or my new machine at home. It requires Visual Studio Community. I had previously done this back in June and didn't have any problems with it. And the only thing that I can think of is that in this forum, somebody says that somebody, this particular version, after a certain version of Visual Studio, which is has a compiler to compile parts of what are needed to run NERF Studio, something changed and now it doesn't compile this. Like it's a mess out there, everybody. So like, this is bad. Like it's one of the things that I like least about this stuff is that 9 layers of getting stuff to work. This is what a Gaussian splat looks like. So this is an example and a way to implement the radiance fields. This is a scan around my house. This is a live render. Like a lot of times what you have to do is like set up cameras and like render that shot as you go around. This is just me like tooling through an environment in real time and just recording the screen as it rolls. It's not perfect, right? Like that doesn't perfectly look like a tree would look like if you were there, but it's pretty close. And the house looks a lot like a photo, but it's not, right? Like this isn't a video. This is a render of a 3D environment. And all of this stuff can be VR'd and run around in. So I haven't done that yet, but I know how to do it. So we can do that. This is all facilitated by some software called Lixil Cyber Color, which I unfortunately found out costs $2,500 per year. I don't know if I want to do that or not, but it is quite attractive. I mean, this is basically creating a Gaussian splat from that little Lixil scanner. And I think this is where like the archaeology stuff, like you don't really necessarily need a physical model. Like you just kind of want to be able to like interact with it and like look at stuff and go back and like have a student like virtually examine all of this stuff, right? There's a lot of virtual field work that could be supported with stuff like this. Like all this physical geography stuff that people do, they go out and they do field work and they got to collect data, do all this stuff. Great, do all that, but also take a scan so that you can always go back. Like it's much better than take your notes, right? Nobody's saying don't take notes, but like take a scan and then you've got this record of what it was look like. You can always go back and ask it questions. You can, not only does this create the Gaussian splat, which we're looking at here, but there's a point cloud that lives underneath of it. And this point cloud it's different than other point clouds that you would make. So it doesn't look exactly like what comes off the scanner. It's like derivative of the Gaussian splat. There's some really cool things about it. The level of detail on these trees is fantastic. Did anybody try to, some people in class last semester in advanced remote sensing tried to use a GoPro to like recreate trees and stuff. Like not this
Did not
good.
work well.
No, it's really hard. And so this is really exciting. The level of detail. You can see it's like interestingly structural, right? Like, like this building, this is a house. Like it's the edges, right? It's the corners and the windows and all of that stuff. Like it's not evenly spread, but it's kind of like what you kind of really do need to recreate it in a more interesting way. You can take measurements on these things as well, which is amazing, right? So this is just like a really interesting 3D thing. You just like boop, boop, boop. Okay, that's 4.3 meters. And again, you're measuring this off of a Gaussian splat radiance field as opposed to something else, right? Like not a mesh or a point cloud. It's a radiance field. Neat. A lot of this NeRF radiance field stuff in general is set up for smaller things, right? It works really well at like a room scale, or like I want to image like a construction site, stuff like that has been kind of the focus. What if you want to do this for like a campus or a city? I think that's the part where I think we're figuring it out. So these are a couple of versions of attempts to solve that problem that I ran into. Vast Gaussian, sort of a tongue-in-cheek here, Vast Gaussian claims that it's great. They've got this great sort of comparison, and you can slide between all of these different alternatives. They really do look a lot better, especially, you know, like you can kind of tell from this middle one, like this is kind of mushy. Like it's good, but it's way sharper here. This looks photorealistic, but it's not, right? It's a model that's generated. In like windows and stuff that don't quite generate weird artifacts and stuff that come into play here. I was impressed by Vast Gaussian's at least claims. This was another one. This is Smurf. Just real-time large scene exploration is kind of what we're after, right? Like not can you render a fly through in 20 minutes, but like can you explore this in real time in VR or whatever. Okay. And then I've been sort of trying to do a big reconstruction of Carl's site in Rapa Nui. So he flew 2 drone flights, one at 30 meters and one at 60 meters of this big volcanic crater down there that's used to create the cool Easter Island heads that you see. They're actually not just heads, they're full flying statues, but he's been after trying to do this reconstruction. So it's about 12,000 images per flight, which sounds like a lot, but it's not, and it is a lot, right? But it shouldn't be beyond the capability of like that computer to handle, or even these computers to handle. And yet lots of different attempts to kind of reconstruct that environment have failed. And so I spent a lot of time over break trying to figure out why. We tried ArcGIS's reality software, which is basically like drone to map, like it's like the better version of that. We've tried Pix4D Mapper and Pix4D Matic, and they both kind of come together, but like you know, 200 images don't calibrate, which is not the biggest problem, but by now that should key you in that there's another problem, right? Like if your images, there's that many images, and okay, it's 1% of the images, but why not? You know, and the problem is that they're calibrating in chunks. It's not that, it's that it calibrates in like 20 groups. And so you get fragments and ghosts of it here. So when, you know, it doesn't look good when you go to represent it, at least not to my eye. Carl, it's interesting because Carl's coming at this like, he's got specific things that he wants to see. And I kind of like want to see the whole thing like gel together. Like, I don't care that you can see the statues, but I do care that they're like ghosty fragments of things that don't exist and like the things don't form a solid structure. So it's been a matter of trying to figure that out. So one of the things that I figured out was that so when you fly one of the DJI drones, like the Mavic 3, which Mavic 4s are coming out now, so we have to think about whether we want to get one of those or not. But there's a smart oblique function to these, where it flies the drone, and then it pivots the camera and takes a picture at 45 degrees, this way, that way, that way, and that way. It's not like it just like stops and does all 5 and then goes to the next one and does all 5. It kind of like figures out what it can do without stopping. So like it kind of does some of them this way and then kind of does some of them that way. The default setting for that is 45-degree oblique. And one of the things as I was digging into the NERC things, they had this like photogrammetry guy who was awesome. And he's like, you really don't want to change the perspective on your image by more than 30 degrees, which I hadn't heard that number before. So that was kind of interesting. So the fact that they change an orientation from straight down to 45 degrees means that the key points are too dissimilar. Like the images, like to a human figures it out instantly, right? But to a computer, the whole pattern of these key points is like so different that it doesn't know how to gel them together, right? It's the algorithm that just works in a way, and it can be fooled in some ways. And so he was saying that that smart oblique should be 30 degrees. Like they shouldn't set it to 45. They should set it to 30. And then you'd have a much better time with the reconstruction. And I had actually come to the same conclusion working through this, that it was the obliques that was causing the problem. So I wrote some code, and this is documented in the last example. I'll probably share this in the programming class, but as a way to like, okay, I've got 12,000 images. How do I separate out what is an oblique image and from which direction, right? So I want all of the obliques northward to be in one pile, and I want all of the westward ones to be in another pile, and all of the nadir ones to be in another pile. So 5 piles of images. And so I wrote some code to like look at the metadata and then just move the files. Really simple Python. It's just like, 10 lines of code to inspect it and then do some behavior based on what it sees. So I'll share that. It's just an example where this stuff is really useful, right? Need one little job. How do I do it? And that totally works. So if you do separate it that way, run each one separately and then combine them, then they all come together. And then this was kind of starting to get a sense of like, how well did they come together? So I think for those of you who are in advanced remote sensing, what are we looking for in a point cloud when we want to figure out whether this reconstruction works? We're kind of looking to see, like, are the surfaces thin? Are there signs of ghosting? Those are the things that we want to know. I wish I had a ghosting example here, but this actually works so well. So this is the point cloud, 1.3 billion points. And so as you're looking at it, so here's one of the statues that's being carved out of the rock. At the end. So I thought I had another one. Sorry, I don't know where that one went, but it's good. So as you pan around and kind of look around, those were true, right? There's not obvious signs of fragmenting. So in that sense, I think it's reconstructing better than reality and better than if you just dump all of the images in, which it does run, but it then has all of these weird artifacts. And so then the next question is, can you create a mesh out of it? So point clouds don't always look great for visualization. You get like to the end of this. I mean, that looks okay, but it looks a little grainy, right? And you can increase the size of the points to make up for that a little bit. But ultimately, meshes often look a little bit better. So you're making a real surface out of it. So this is the mesh with 1 million faces, which is not very many, believe it or not. And then the max texturing, which is 32,000. And then this is put into a web-based way to explore the data. So it's quite responsive. You can move around in real time, that's all great. A-frame, Faye, is the way that you can create like VR-able point clouds and meshes really easily. So that's kind of one of the things that I'll be showing you. But this is some work that I had done over the summer with the point cloud of campus. So I just had it ready to roll. So yeah, it's pretty easy. You'll see that the trees are pretty blobby. Again, this is a 1 million face point cloud, which is not very many, but this is the volcanic crater. You can move around. And then just two of these. This is the 20 million faces. And so what I was really after was like, does this look good? Gotta figure out a way to turn this off. So I would say it is okay. Carl hasn't weighed in on this yet, so I don't know. And this is looking at this in ArcPro Pro in Scene, actually, which looks a little bit better than the A-frame version 3D tiles. My attempts to do this in Mapper were sort of in parallel. So also sort of solving each direction, nadir and northward and eastward and so on, and then merging them together. These all merged together. It took about 3 to 4 hours to do that. Again, almost all of the images calibrated. 2 did not, and there's very good reasons why they didn't. This image is weirdly blurry for some reason, and I don't know why, but it was never going to calibrate. And then there's one kind of at the top, but it's like a ways away from the other one. So it doesn't have enough overlap. And I don't know why that one was captured, but it's like 30 meters or 40 meters away from the other one. So, so perfect recalibration as far as I'm concerned. Oh, this is the one I was thinking of. So this is just in, this is just a quick export. I didn't even re-optimize these. But as you duck through the point cloud, it looks nice and even, right? There's no extra little fragments and junk kind of hanging around. When you do re-optimize, the whole reason, I guess the first attempt that I made at this was to like spatially separate them out. So like dump all of them in there, but Mapper has a function that says, well, I don't want any more than X number of images per project. And then you run each project separately and then you stick them together. And I was getting these weird seams. So the blue is the GPS location and the green is the location that I thought it was at after calibration. When you get these weird stripy patterns, it was sort of a big red flag that like something is wrong with the reconstruction. But it did it when I did it this way as well. I had assumed that these were boundaries. I didn't even look into it. I just was like, oh, it seems about right. But maybe not. So that was curious. And maybe means that you don't need to go to the trouble of like separating things out, that it's enough but I still think it's better to do it that way. A couple of other interesting things. When you do a big area like this, it's important to set a processing boundary. So here, I actually did this in ARC. I had it generate a convex hull, which is like if you took a rubber band around all of the points, like what would it be? And then I manually adjusted this like little inset part, like concavity part here, adjust that. And then I applied a buffer inward. At the edges of your reconstruction, in geography, you always get these edge effects, right? Things aren't the same at the edges of your data set as they are in the middle. So I wanted to exclude those out. So that's why I buffered in. If you don't do that, if you don't have any processing area at all, it's going to try to get all of the points, like as far as it can see. And that area adds up, right? Like the area around like this perimeter is a lot of area. So it really slows down your processing time. So just by adding something like a processing area, you can cut your processing down by like half because it's not generating stuff that you don't really want anymore.
Do you do that manually, or like did you just set a parameter to like have that buffer?
So I used the geotagged photos to
Oh,
whatever. I got points, did the convex hull, and then just did a quick edit on the convex hull to kind of make it dip in a little bit. Wasn't too bad. 10 minutes of work.
okay. So like you manually like clicked all the boundary that you wanted.
Just this part of the vertex, just probably put in like 20 points.
Okay, like it looks almost like systematic. Like, yeah, it looks very like accurate.
Thanks. And by having, and I didn't feel like I needed to get super accurate on the edge because I was buffering inward anyway, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Yeah, and pretty fast. 6.5 hours to generate about 1 billion points. And a note here that the point cloud generation was using like 100% CPU. One of the things I've been after is like what parts of the reconstruction process are like effectively using all of your computational resources. So that computer has 64 cores, but not every step is fully utilizing all of those cores in the graphics card effectively, right? Sometimes you log in and it's like 8%. So it's good to see it, you know, it's a good sign sort of that it's leveraging everything that it got. I built a computer at home over break. So I built a 32 core machine. Mine was 7 years old or something like that. So it was time for an upgrade. So I decided this is what I do all day. I might as well spend some money on it. So I built a nice machine, but we can get some good comparisons between like, what do we get for a 64 core machine versus a 32 core machine. The 32 cores have a faster clock speed, for instance. Some of the stuff does, I actually did some benchmarking. I forget the numbers, but it's not that much different than the bigger machine, right? And that's often true, right? Resources don't linearly affect the outcome, so. Yeah, playing around with it. Right now, I'm still on a 4060 graphics card, which is pretty good. But NVIDIA is releasing the 5090 and 5080 on January 30th. So I'm just kind of waiting around for that. And we'll see what that can do. All right, so goals for me. I got to get everybody running on projects, so hopefully we can get our meeting times ironed out. I'm thinking about Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, trying to keep. Last time was Thursdays. I really like things to happen earlier in the week, so we can kind of set the table of stuff you've got to get going, and then the lab meeting becomes the bookend of like, okay, how did it go? We'll repeat that cycle. So let's try to shoot for like Mondays and Tuesdays if we need to get those meetings off the ground. Oh, and then some other junk I have to do as well. Okay. Who's got time constraints? I know I kind of went on for a while, but it's been a busy time. What are your time constraints?
Also 12.
Well,
Yeah, I have 12.
ooh, I went on way too long. We got a late start.
11:50 for me, but only today, so it's not gonna be a constant thing.
11:50?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What was that constitution?
Okay. And then who's presenting?
I don't know an actual presentation though, so.
Yeah, just give us an update then. That's all.
So for me, big thing that I did over winter break was the drone 107 exam. So I did that, after some hassle with scheduling, which was finally.
Snow delay, was it?
Yes, we got like 10 inches over a Sunday and a Monday, which is not, we haven't gotten that much snow where I live in several years. Which closed the engineering school. I was supposed to take it, but they didn't let me know. So I was like calling them repeatedly, trying to like see what was happening with my exam, but obviously they weren't open, so they weren't responding to me. Until like 15 minutes, I was about to leave, like drive through the snow to go take it. And they're like, oh, actually we're closed, we have to reschedule. So then they're like, oh, just email us tomorrow, reschedule, which I did, and they still didn't respond to me. So then I ended up having like delay like a whole another week before I could actually take the exam. But we got it done. I passed.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Now I sent it. I submitted the application and things to the FAA, so they're just doing the check, and then I should be getting the actual license here soon, assuming I pass that as well. So the things that I'm kind of working on, I've been in contact with Brianna about the Peru trip, kind of started getting ready for booking flight details and kind of getting a more in-depth view of what I'm supposedly supposed to be doing there, which has been nice. And I should be meeting with her next week to kind of solidify those things as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much been it.
Great. Did you guys know that? Well, you probably know, but David Mixter, who you're going to be working with, is married to Brianna. What's your last name? Langley?
Yes.
In the anthropology department.
No, I did not know that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that sounds great. All right, other people that have time constraints that are presenting. You've got a time constraint that are not presenting. Buckman, not presenting? Okay. Does that cover everybody? Very good. All right, and who is presenting? Peter, Teresa,
Very small one.
Veronica, do you have a time constraint?
No, I don't.
You're
but
good?
My presentation is too short.
That's fine. All right, and then Lily should be joining us. So feel free to just duck out when you got to go, which is normal, right? Like, so just we'll see you next time. Very good. Okay, Peter, you want to take over?
So I'm just gonna go over some interesting things that happened before break, and then kind of what I've been currently working on. over the winter break as well. So before I went on winter break, there was like kind of like a malfunction with the Mavic 3T. It was very interesting what happened. I flew on Friday the 13th, so I blame it on that. But what ended up happening was as the drone was flying, I told it to come back. I think when it appeared like it had 20% of its battery left. But then it got to like, you can see in the picture there, it got kind of like in the middle, and then all of a sudden I see its battery drop to like 3%. Because it was like, I guess because it was super cold outside. It wasn't the windiest day either. So then it just stopped mid-flight and it said, I need to land. And then it landed itself. And thank God it has obstacle avoidance. I
Oh.
used that to
Yeah,
avoid all the trees. But you can see that I had to go dig it up in a nature preserve in the leftmost photo. That's where I
Awesome.
landed. So
I'm glad you got a photo of it. It's got pretty good camouflage.
yeah,
It's hard to find.
it's kind of hard to find because like can't like really make it like deep or anything. So I had to use the controller to like
Look for it?
GPS track myself and
Yeah.
find where it was at.
Yeah,
And then after that, like the rightmost photo, like I was like the propellers also kind of need to be changed out a little bit too. So
Yeah.
yeah. So this is probably important for anybody who's gonna fly the Mavic 3T now. I changed the settings for the critically low battery to be at least 25%, so it should return home when it hits that. I think I even upped it again, just to 30% just to be extra safe. So it'll tell you it's low when it's at 35% and I think it should try to return home when it's at 30%.
yeah, when it's cold, the batteries don't last as long, so you gotta give an extra margin of safety for the very cold weather. Altitude is similarly an effect, so flying in the Andes Mountains, you will want a very healthy
Yeah.
cushion. Easy to fly twice.
And this is a current look at what the deer data is coming out to look like. So there's plenty of deer in CIW. There's a little bit of a survey bias because there have been more flights in CIW than other areas of the nature preserve. But as I've started flying the rest of the nature preserve, there are a lot of hot spots. And what I've come to realize too is that deer are crepuscular, so that means they are like animals of the dark. They are most active during twilight hours, so that's very early morning or towards late at night. Like around, like I've seen at like huge activity around 5 p.m., which is. Oh, and this is the LiDAR DEMs that Dr. Penguin and I were working on over break a little bit as well. The first one to the left is showcasing the original one. And I just pointed out some trails there to see if there could be better definition of those. And then the rightmost one, you can kind of see those trails a little bit more defined with the with this image. And we're gonna use this to try to track deer trails within CIW and hopefully get flights over the nature preserve as well. And also, yeah, just been writing parts of my thesis. My introduction is pretty much almost complete, just doing a little bit of detail work, adding in some figures, citing a bunch of sources, and creating some infographics. Interestingly, that infographic I had ChatGPT help me. And I found a deer like population chart over time. And I sent what was cool about this was that I used a picture. I copy and pasted a picture into ChatGPT. I said, how can I create this? And then it just like kind of like helped me write a bunch of code to get to this point. This is an R too.
Cool. That's a good figure.
And then for my goals, just really hammer away at data analysis, email masters committee, continue drone flights. I'm actually going to try to go out today to try to do one. Definitely finish up the intro and have a rough draft of my methods pretty soon within the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Sounds awesome. All right, thanks, Peter. All right. Hey, thanks for coming. You there?
Yeah.
So my lab report is gonna start back in December, right before winter break. I attended a GU American Geophysical Union Conference 2024 that was held in Washington DC. And this is the poster that I presented. So there was some new information that I added that I did not have previously in the fall semester. There's a more detailed infographic on the PFM1 mine, and what it looks like on the inside, especially that cylinder where the trigger is to detonate this mine. The other thing that I did right before AGU was getting the spectral signature of the PFM1 mine that I had, which is here. So this is an inert mine. It does not contain any explosive. We mainly were looking at the wing of it. So this was done at the ITC campus here at Binghamton, and the reason why we have this is because we have a spectral signature of a PFM1 mine from Ehab Mackey's dissertation from 2017. So it would be really cool to do a comparison of the spectral signature that I have versus what he has. I got some good feedback on my poster. I got a few business cards. There was one individual that reached out afterwards and they were interested in the method that we use. So that's something that I will probably email or forward you that email about.
Great,
Because
great.
there is some interest. Overall, it was a pretty good conference. The other thing that I am currently working on and will have to really jumpstart is getting to the second half of my thesis, which is, you know, we tried to use structure for motion. We tried to use Pix4D Mapper to get the image of the field site that I went to over the summer, and it doesn't really work. So what if we use the individual georeferenced images and some machine learning to try and detect the PFM lines? So the idea is to use label image or label imager to label all of the PFM1 mine imagery that I have and use that in addition with something called YOLO V5. So to get started, I used a tutorial that YOLO V5 provided, or VerbalFlow, I should say. They use something called Google Colab, which is essentially a cloud-hosted service that allows you to code using your web browser. So I just kind of followed through the tutorial that they provided on Google Colab. If you are new to coding, Google Colab is a good way to start. They provide GPU, TPUs as well. It's free, but there are some limitations to it. For example, you know, you can't use it for more than 12 hours continuously. And then you are limited in the GPUs that they provide. They do offer premium subscriptions, but that requires money. But they have some pre-installed libraries included in Google Colab, so it's a good way to start, especially in machine learning. They also have TensorFlow pre-installed as well into Google Colab. So that's kind of where I started to get an introduction to YOLO V5. So then over winter break, Dr. Kringle and I were in the lab and we were setting up YOLO V5 here on this grad computer here and trying to find or detect the PFM1 lines. So there are two main components to this, just like a general broad overview. You do need label imager to label all of your imagery first, and then once you've done that, you migrate into YOLO V5, and there is a GitHub page that Dr. Kringle has set up to walk you through it. But essentially, once you've labeled all your imagery, it's kind of like a video game setup where you have your keyboard shortcuts and you kind of just go through the method. Pretty straightforward. And then these were some of our initial results. So these are images that were taken here on campus in one of the environments that I've identified, which is sort of like gravel. And you can see that it was able to identify the PFM1 mines pretty good. So you can see that it has in red PFM1, and then it has the confidence interval. I'm assuming that's what that is, 0.8. And then it also has on the right, the recall confidence curve. So I was able to recall it at 98% confidence. The other thing that I've been doing is I've been reading a paper called Deep Learning Based Real-Time Detection of Surface Landmines using Optical Images. The objective of this paper was to detect superficial UXOs, including the PFM1, which I'm researching on. They used optical and informatic applications, and they used a robotic platform in this case. The methods they used is, again, a robotic platform that they labeled UGO first. And it had some instruments on it, including a high-precision GPS, LiDAR, holographic radar, accelerometers. And in addition to that, they used a mobile camera. And in this case, they used an iPhone 13 Pro. So they were able to collect the imagery using the camera from the iPhone 13 Pro, and then they utilized YOLOv8, which is just a different version of what I'm currently using. And they had pretty high precision, 97% for the PFM1, and they also detected a different type of surface mine known as the PME2 mines. They did have a false positive rate of about 27% for PFM1s and 47% for the PME2 mines. The advantage to this that they mentioned in the paper was that you could also utilize this method on a UAV, so it does not have to be limited to a robotic platform. And then for my goals for this next week, I need to finish up my introduction for my thesis. I have some literature reviews I'd like to complete, a goal of at least 3 this week. I want to organize my directories for YOLOv5. So I collected imagery in different environmental settings. So I want to be able to kind of organize that. So when I go into YOLOv5, it kind of is all laid out nicely for me there. Organizing the Google Drive, uploading. I think this is an old bubble here, so ignore that. There are some emails that I have to complete, and then I want to also understand some of the output metrics for YOLOv5 better, so that way I have a more well-rounded understanding of what I'm looking at. That's
Very
it.
good. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Yolanda?
See you.
Forgot to go into my whole spiel about replacing the propellers and how they were like all different.
Oh, yeah.
Double click on.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
To see how they changed them that much.
It seems like everybody just uses the 3 propellers and doesn't worry about the Pro. That's my takeaway from that. And they seem like okay with that, but like, you know, I wish it were like, yes, it's fine. They're always like, yes, it's fine, but we do recommend that you use the other thing. What does that mean? Am I gonna crash? All right, ready?
Nothing much. I want to show you the proposal that I have written for the geographical theory. Why I'm showing this one because I like the title much. The Soundscapes Lab integrating LiDAR and acoustic sensor for enhanced indoor mapping and human visualization.
Cool.
Almost all the things that come into my mind, I'm going to integrate. I have listed all the things and I tried my best to make a good proposal. And I'm happy with the proposal that
Yeah,
I will be sending it to you also, Professor.
great.
And the next thing is in the vacation, I was reviewing this paper and also I was going through the build proposal. That's the build ecology project Timber.
Mhm.
These 2 things I have done. Nothing much, and entire time I was enjoying catching fish. I forgot to mention about one thing also. I have seen the spaceship, the leftover spaceship of Apollo 30 because I was in the NASA museum. I visited and I touched
Oh,
the rock of moon.
Oh, wow.
Everything.
I'm the last 2 nights I've been watching the movie First Man with oh, what's the guy's name? I don't know, it's about Neil Armstrong, the Apollo program. So that's awesome.
And there is their dresses that they uh preserve them very nicely. The astronaut dressed that they went to the moon and came back. All the things are there.
Great.
And this is my goal, learning Python. I'm having some difficulties. I don't know why in the Anaconda. At first it was working smoothly, but after the break, when I started again, it's not working. Sometimes I'm having malfunctioning. Yesterday, I also reinstalled it, but I don't know why it's not working properly. I have to figure it out. And I will work with the sample data. That's my goal.
Sounds fantastic. Great,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Presentation today or not?
I didn't know we were doing presentations.
No, that's fine. You want to give a quick update on a little bit what's going on?
Actually, I have great news. I figured out how to do Windows in Fusion 360.
Oh, yeah?
I talked to my friend who's an engineering major. He told me in 5 minutes how to do it. It
Oh,
took me
great.
5 hours. Amazing. So I've been looking a lot into like the ArcGIS indoors. I looked at all the tools that we have, so I learned like the basics of how to use it, as well as some indoor positioning tools. So I feel ready to get started with it.
Great. Very good. Yeah, I'm excited to kind of move forward on that. Gianna, you've been messing around with Fusion 360 as well?
I just started with Fusion 360. I was doing the training that you sent me pretty much all break, so I was working on that, and then just started with 360. I've been focusing on Cloud Compare
Oh, yeah.
mostly. So,
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, I'm pretty okay with that, and then I've been doing some things in Arc, but nothing too super crazy. So
Okay. Cool.
making my way.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, I don't have, I got a lot of recordings of the LiDAR stuff that I did in advanced remote sensing. But I don't have a lot of the structure for motion stuff. So I bought a nicer microphone because I know my microphone is kind of awful for some of those recordings. So I'm hoping this is a little bit easier on the ears. For these things that might last a couple of years, I thought it was worth the investment. So hopefully that will help. But we'll set some goals to try to get the structure from motion lectures recorded, because that's going to benefit both of you and everyone on the road. So we'll keep doing that. All right. Anything else? I think that covers all the bases. Very good. If you guys can stick around for 1 minute, I would love to get a PFM mine on the printer as a first step in your printing world, and then printing one of these things out. Let's just see what happens with it. Should take 10 minutes. Very good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Yep.
Our in-person meeting scheduled today.
Oh, I wanted to. Ooh, rats. Yes, we should.